Donald Trump handed ICE a massive windfall in his One Big Beautiful Bill Act, making it America's highest-funded law enforcement agency with $85 billion to spend. And that kind of money buys a lot of tools, including some state-of-the-art technology that is powering the president's mass deportation crackdown. ICE is making use of surveillance tech ranging from biometric trackers to cell phone location, databases, spyware, and drones, all while the administration loosens restrictions on how it uses some of these technologies. According to new reporting from the Washington Post, the Department of Homeland Security revealed in an annual report on Wednesday that the agency, quote, has significantly expanded the operational scope for its use of facial recognition, AI, and other advanced technologies. In a statement to the Post, DHS said what ICE is doing is, quote, no different than other law enforcement agencies, but adding, quote, we are not going to divulge law enforcement sensitive methods. So I guess Big Brother really is watching. I want to look at some of the powerful tools in ICE's arsenal. Over the past year, ICE has started using facial recognition technology. You may have seen videos and pictures of this. If you've seen any of the ICE arrests, you've seen pictures like this. Officers holding up a phone to a person's face while conducting immigration enforcement. What you're seeing is the real-time use of a new app called Mobile Fortify. The app enables ICE to essentially scan a person's face and fingerprints. Those scans are then compared against a database containing individuals' immigration status and other biographical information. So if an officer scans the face of someone who's undocumented, the app should tell them. Here's how it works. An ICE agent uses a phone camera to record an image of a face. The software then detects the face in the image. It then extracts key facial features, converting the information into a digital profile. The profile is then checked against a database of faces, and once the comparison is complete, the system reports a possible match. This is all done in a fraction of a second. According to the Washington Post, in the past, ICE and other federal agencies have been cautious about using facial recognition technology, largely because of concerns about accuracy, especially when identifying people of color. This is actually a real problem. Studies show that facial recognition technology is, in fact, often inaccurate when it comes to people of color. A 2018 study titled Gender Shades, published by MIT Media Lab, found error rates of just 0.8% for light-skinned men, compared to 34.7% for darker-skinned women. A federal study conducted in 2019 supported these conclusions, finding that facial recognition works best on middle-aged white men. In a statement to the Post, DHS says, quote, Mobile Fortify is a lawful law enforcement tool developed under the Trump administration to support accurate identity and immigration status verification during enforcement operations. It operates with a deliberately high matching threshold and queries only limited CBP immigration data sets, end quote. Another one of ICE's tools includes the use of cell phone locations and phone location databases. ICE officers have the ability to track a phone's location in real time through cell site simulators. They're known as stingrays. Now, a stingray tricks a phone into thinking it's a normal cell tower, and when a suspect's device connects to it, the officers can trace its location. In law enforcement operations, stingrays are used in two main ways. If officers already know a phone's number, they can use the simulator to track it down, or they can scan all the cell phones in the area. As TechCrunch, the tech news platform, notes, some cell site simulators can intercept regular calls, text messages, and internet traffic, which means that anyone whose phone is in the vicinity of a stingray could connect to it and feed the government information without even knowing. Take a look at this image. This is generated by the Washington Post. In order to be usable, a cell phone must connect to a cell tower. Your phone automatically connects to the strongest signal that's available. In this image, you and your phone are down at the bottom left, trying to connect to the tower on the right. The stingray, which is mounted on the van, mimics a real cell tower, causing your phone to connect to it instead of the legitimate phone company tower. ICE agents have to obtain a search warrant from a judge, by the way, before deploying a stingray. But according to the Washington Post, quote, ICE guidelines name several broad emergency exceptions, such as the need to protect human life or avert serious injury, being in hot pursuit of a fleeing felon, or to prevent the escape of a suspect or convicted felon from justice, end quote. I'm not finished. Then there are the phone location databases. In 2018, the Supreme Court ruled in Carpenter v. United States that cell phone location data reveals so much about a person's life that authorities need a warrant to get it from phone companies. But federal agencies found a way to circumvent that ruling by buying the data from commercial brokers. Commercial brokers collect location data from weather apps, from mobile games, and other software. These are apps which software in which users technically consent to tracking, often without realizing what that consent actually means. According to the Wall Street Journal, the first Trump administration used these databases for immigration enforcement, but in January of 2024, ICE said it had stopped the practice until September of last year, when ICE quietly purchased a subscription to one such database, once again putting mass surveillance back on the table. That brings us to yet another tool at their disposal, digital forensics. A seized device, your phone for instance, is plugged into specialized hardware. The hardware allows ICE to hack into locked phones and computers, bypassing privacy protections to give law enforcement access to multimedia, to password, communications, locations, deleted files, and even encrypted chats. Most digital forensic tools cannot be used remotely. ICE would actually have to have physical possession of your device. Now, traditionally, these invasive tools were limited to investigations into online child exploitation, human trafficking, financial crimes, and other serious international crimes. But according to the Washington Post, top Trump officials have ordered these investigative resources to be shifted toward Trump's deportation drive. And finally, drones are becoming increasingly part of the field operations involving ICE and Border Patrol officers, providing real-time video back to a base. At the border, drones have been long used to detect migrants. But the Washington Post says ICE has been using small drones to monitor protests over the past year. In the fall, ICE signed a $514,000 contract to purchase new drones, signaling they may play a larger role going forward. All right, that's a lot. So I'm joined by one of the smartest guys I know on technology, the guy I turn to when I just don't even understand it. I can't make myself understand it. Jake Ward. He's the host of the podcast, The Rip Current. He's the author of the book, The Loop, How AI is Creating a World Without Choices and How to Fight Back. Jake, that's a lot, and I actually have to tell our viewer we've hardly scratched the surface. But there's a larger thing here, and that is some of the things that the federal government is using are things that we have allowed to happen. We've allowed the government either greater access or the way we deal with our information on our phones. We've allowed some of this to happen.
I think that's absolutely right, Ali. I mean, we live in a country where it has been absolutely normalized to hand over the kind of information about ourselves that at one time would have been the dream of a CIA officer or an NSA officer, right? I mean, something like a thermostat in your house that connects to Wi-Fi, has a motion sensor in front of it, and as a result can track, your comings and goings, much less these listening devices that people buy from Amazon. I won't name them because there's so many of your viewers that have them. I'll accidentally set them off if I say the brand name, right? That kind of purchase has been so normalized in this country in exchange for the conveniences that come with it, that we forget that eventually the kind of thing that you are describing is made possible for a surveillance state as it forms around us. As you mentioned, when an agency like ICE doesn't have the judicial permission it requires, it can simply go to the private market and buy this stuff from commercial data brokers. The fact that we have made that all possible through the normalization of private surveillance for money is pretty extraordinary.
And it's a whole different segment we can have about how people can keep themselves safe in their digital world. But given what I've just told our viewers about, what stands out to you about the technology that the government is using right now?
Well, what's so amazing, right, is I think back, you and I have known each other a long time, and once upon a time we were covering the original Ukraine protests, right,
Yep.
in the snow as Russian agitators are coming in, and that situation was coming to a head back in 2014. I was looking back at reporting that I did at that time, and there were it reports at that time of protesters discovering that their phones would suddenly beep and say, you have been recorded in a database as an agitator. And at that time, drones were also beginning to move around the crowd and catching faces. And back in 2014, right, we just thought that was such a sort of chilling thing. To think that we are now 12 years on from that, the kind of incredibly sophisticated technology that has become normalized, and the fact that it is not just happening in Ukraine, it is not just happening in Hong Kong, it is happening in Minnesota, right? That we are in a world now where this stuff is being deployed actively on American citizens. I mean, one thing that I have to say is, based on everything we have learned about this stuff, it's no wonder these guys wear masks, right? It is the clearest sign that they understand what the technological array that they have at their disposal makes possible when you are unmasked in public these days. These guys are using systems like, the Clearview system, which you and I have reported on in the past, a commercially available system that is a universal facial recognition system. It scrapes images off of Facebook and anywhere else you might have it and creates a universal place for law enforcement agents to do this stuff. So, the array of invasive technologies is one thing, but the other thing that really stands out to me here, Ali, is just how little regulation and oversight there actually is. The only real regulation that exists over so much of this stuff, especially around AI and facial recognition, is a kind of self-reported determination that something is either quote unquote high impact or not. Whether you are using it as your primary way of making a determination that someone is to be pursued by law enforcement, or whether you are using human discretion. And it's entirely up to the agencies to determine whether or not they are relying heavily on this technology or using actual human investigation. And to my mind, what's so sort of crazy about that is that what we've seen time and again is that as these technologies get into the working patterns of law enforcement, they become so second nature for these agencies. We've seen time and again protesters grabbed entirely on the basis of a facial recognition system, or in many cases misidentified entirely on the basis of a facial recognition system. And these are law enforcement agencies that are not taking the time to actually then double check whether they've got the right guy. They just go grab whatever this technology tells them to grab. And as these systems are more and more systematizing and automating the decision-making process, it takes what is already a very chilling agency mission and makes it an even more robotic and inhumane kind of pursuit strategy that could ensnare anybody, honestly, Ali.
By the way, we know that a lot of people who are getting arrested are people of color. I was fascinated by these inaccuracies that change depending on whether you're a person of color or you're white.
That's absolutely right. We back in 2018 talked to the very first man ever misidentified by police and arrested on that basis, a guy named Robert Williams in Detroit, Michigan. And he was, this poor guy grabbed off of his porch by people who'd accused him of jewelry, stealing jewelry. He had a rock solid alibi, no reason to be there, and yet was, detained for, I believe, overnight. We're seeing this time and again. And again, it's what we see with technological use in the surveillance and law enforcement world is that it really erodes human judgment. At a time when we are normalizing some very inhumane behavior anyway, it is taking the humanity out of the process to an extent that I think is really, it's roboticizing law enforcement that is already on a fairly robotic and inhumane mission.